All right, so got some new books this week. Excited. This is a collection of Alan Watts' writings called Become What You Are, that touches on the dilemma of the person who seeks his or her true self. A quest so often undertaken at the expense of seeing one's life just as it is. As Alan Watts wrote, life exists only at this very moment. And in this moment, it is infinite and eternal. For the present moment is infinitely small. Before we can measure it, it has gone, and yet it persists forever. It's such a fascinating paradox. This movement and change has been called Tao by the Chinese. I read this yesterday, and I never knew until this moment that the Tao that it's speaking about is the present moment. I knew it was talking about a force, a flow, a power. I did not make that connection. So I'll finish this, then I'll say something else. Okay, so this movement and change. Okay, so let me repeat. So for the present moment is infinitely small. Before we can measure it, it has gone, and yet it persists forever. This movement and change has been called Tao by the Chinese. A sage has said that if we try to accord with it, we shall get away from it. But he was not altogether right. For the curious thing is that you cannot get out of accord with it, even if you want to. Though your thoughts may run into the past or the future, they cannot escape the present moment. So not only did I never connect the present moment with being the Tao, when I read this, somehow, I studied the Course in Miracles for a long time, or I still do. I don't really stop stuff, but I put it on a shelf a lot, and then I realized it's time to bring it down again, because it really called to me that in the book it talks a lot about the holy instant. And it kind of makes it sound like this thing to achieve, similar to the Tao as I had as sort of this force or maybe something more out here. The holy instant was also like this moment to try to achieve where you're going to get insight or something. And I didn't realize that it's actually talking about the present moment. It's the thing that persists forever and yet always changes. There's something really powerful about this message. So it says, understood in this way, to become what you are is at once an impossible directive and an unavoidable fact. I love that line because it takes you to the place where you need Abraham's explanation to ground that. So it says, understood in this way, right? This paradox that something is temporary but yet eternal, and needed in order to try to understand who you are and what your true self is. But it's also an impossible directive. To become what you are is at once an impossible directive and an unavoidable fact. Well, why is that? We now know in studying Abraham that it's an impossible directive to become what you are because you're never complete. You're an eternal being, so you're always going to ask for more. No matter what you get to, you're going to ask for more, want more. So you're never going to get there. So it's an impossible directive. He's right. And an unavoidable fact to become what you are. Of course, you can't help pursue your consciousness and what it wants. Because we are creative in nature, we can't help but constantly ask and desire and design and want to improve. It's what we are. We are creative energy, then embodied. So we cannot avoid becoming that which we are. We're just becoming more and more of it, right? Expanding further, exploring more preferences, growing more into different areas of what we actually are, who we are, what we want. And sometimes we think that's our physical being. And I think the beautiful thing about studying this and then layering Abraham, you realize, no, this is really an eternal conversation. This is a vibrational conversation. This is your consciousness and development conversation, not becoming what you are in this finite lifetime by a deadline. Okay, so he kind of goes on about what the essays are about in this book. And I don't want to get into that, but there's a couple key points. So we hit one key point. I want to get to another one. So there's another quote here by Tan Ching, which reads, if we allow our thoughts, the past, the present, and the future ones, to link up in a series, we put ourselves under restraint. On the other hand, if we let our mind attach to nothing at all times, and toward all things we gain emancipation. So when we're not attached, we can move towards other things. But there's an openness and a flexibility that this is pointing at. When I read attached to nothing, I think of sort of this need right now in our culture to be right. We're very attached to our opinions, our victimization, how we have it, our gender, our skin color. We're super attached. And I think interesting to just kind of let that go and all the stories that come with each one of those things. That's kind of what I got to, and just kind of flowing through life and just experiencing as it comes, rather than experiencing like they did this because of that, be it to me, or I did this because of that. Just flowing with it and not judging with it. So it then goes on to say later, Alan Watts quoted Goethe as saying, "The highest to which man can attain is wonder. And if the prime phenomenon makes him wonder, let him be content." This is sort of talking about joy as the key. The goal is satisfaction, joy. But I love that this also gets into wonder, like, wow, this is such a cool, amazing miracle. And Abraham points at that, like, wow, you can be impressed, like, wow, the planets go around each other in perfect orbit and don't collide. And, you know, everything is just born and grows on time. And so if the prime phenomenon, I would say, like life, makes him wonder, let him be content. Nothing higher can it give him. Nothing further should he seek for behind it. Here is the limit. And this is such a key point about desiring wonder, and what is wonder? It's sort of feeling an awe. It's feeling a sense of being so blessed and abundant with just what is. Like just being so impressed with what is. I think that's what I hear with wonder. I attach it to like the miracles of nature. And I say, but wonder can be anything. It's really just feeling so blessed, like wow, life. And it's kind of how I'm feeling at the moment. I made a catch-up video. I got a new bunny, new car. My family came to visit. It was lovely. I registered for grad school, got my FAFSA. The barking dog next door moved away. Things are great with my hubby. He started his new job and likes it. There's just on and on and on and on of wonderful things. I got a new beautiful bunny picture from a friend she painted. I have lots of socks. And I just think, I mean, that was a joke, but how blessed we are with all the different things that we get to have, and the sense of wonder being the goal. And for so long I've said joy doesn't feel like enough, satisfaction doesn't feel like enough, but I'm beginning to wonder if they don't seem like enough because I just haven't achieved those levels. And then when you achieve those levels of joy and happiness, or as I do, I go, oh, well, this is worth it. It is more interesting to be in the conversation of actively creating your life or drawing it to you, sort of in a gravitational pull, and watching it happen than thinking things are just happening to you and sort of the Zeus in the sky or the dead, mechanical, stupid universe. You're getting something out of it, like you figured the machine out, or you've begged enough from the guy up there, or whatever it is. Like you're a much more active participant, and I love that. So as Alan Watts wrote, to receive the universe into himself, after the manner of some mystics, is simply to become inflated with the conceit that one is God, and so set up yet another opposition between the mighty whole and the degraded part. I think that's such a brilliant thing to see, that it's very easy to fall into sort of the spiritual egoism of thinking you're God and missing the point that if you're God, everything's God. So it's sort of equalizing in its specialness. To give oneself utterly and slavishly to the world is to become a spiritual non-entity, a mechanism, a shell, a leaf blown by the winds of circumstance. But if the world is received and the self given at the same time, there prevails that union which brings about the second birth. So here, which is so cool, Allen Watch is actually starting to align what I love to think about and study, right, which is the symbolism in Christ, the symbolism in Christianity of that second birth, of a merging of two ways of being. Now that could be really great in theory, but confusing in application until you have, again, Abraham come along and say, hey, you're right. You do have both of these. You do have this human physical component, and you do have, this sort of a leaf blown by circumstance, or certainly can feel that way, to feel like a spiritual non-entity, a completely physical being. And a lot of people believe themselves to be that way, right? And you have this huge spiritual component that really kind of isn't here. So it says, if the world is received and the self given at the same time, right? So you're in the world, you're receiving it, you're of it, but you're also giving of your full self. There is a spiritual component. There is a creative spiritual component that is connected to all life. You're not here on your own just navigating a physical environment. There is a very powerful vibrational creative element that would have been very difficult to understand that relationship without Abraham explaining it. Hey, if your emotions are your guide between your physical and emotional self, and you really are trying to or achieve this delicate balance of kind of realizing like the world isn't really real. That's kind of what the Course in Miracles gets into. It's a little bit of a dream, like for agreements, we're sort of generating this world based on our mental capacity and projecting it out in some way. We basically create a physical environment that our senses are interpreting, but reality is vibrational, and we know that with physics, we know that with science. Things are molecules, they're waves, they're particles. This is an actual space. It's the perception of my senses of the space. And so our goal really here is to realize there's an element of this physicality, even though it feels real, that isn't as real, in the sense of putting all our faith in it as the driving force of what occurs. So you're in the world and receiving it, but you're also saying, you know what, this isn't entirely everything, and realizing that you are a powerful, connected, creative source. You could call it God or universe or whatever, of creative energy playing in this environment. And by the way you think about it and what you feel, you'll have a different experience. And not only have a different experience, you'll impact others' experiences towards what you truly desire, which is kindness, compassion, a world that is safe and full of joy and happiness. But you have to believe it's possible, and you have to believe that the power for that is emanating from something that you feel, not something that you see. You also have to be willing to believe that you can be a sort of vessel for that power and energy to enter this world, but in your physical capacity, you can only connect and follow its guide. You do not actually house the creative power or perspective of your source energy self. So it's a bit otherworldly, if you will, but it's really not otherworldly because actually it's vibrational, which is what this is too. It just seems to be otherworldly because you've got goggles on. It's like one of those awesome games or something where you could like put on goggles and see a whole different world. I think there's a couple video games like that. Like there's a world and then you put on glasses, and when you look through them, like the whole world's different. There's an element of that happening, and there's also an element of each one of us being in our own dream world, generated by our own set of beliefs, what we think is possible. Remember, no one can override your free will. So you kind of have your own bubble where you experience life according to what you believe and think. And if we were taught that from a young age, we would know the power of multiple perspectives, because we would know you literally can see and experience things that I don't, because you have different beliefs and a different attraction point and creative point and desires than I do. So naturally, when we all look at the same event, we're going to see 10 different things. We wouldn't find that a flaw. We would be expecting that and learn to use its advantages in a way. So back to this, Watts continues to talk about this perspective sort of on the Christ. So it says, thus when we say that out of the union between self and life, or the world, there is born the Christ, we mean that the man rises to a new center of consciousness, which is neither himself alone or the world alone. Indeed, this center already exists, whether he knows it or not, for no two opposites can exist unless there is a relation between them. Again, nailing the point between Abraham, it might feel like your physical and spiritual self are opposites, but they're not. They're connected pole. And I guess in this capacity, it's saying neither himself alone or the world alone. In that sense, your self would be your higher self, or what the Course in Miracles will reference as the Holy Spirit. So there's the piece of you, your avatar in the world, and then the piece of you that has that broader perspective. That's sort of, I think, the fifth level of consciousness, Neville calls it. So I wanted to quickly grab something from the Course in Miracles, because this is really sort of getting into that connection, but these can get into deep concepts. So I think I'm just going to touch on real quick what it talks about revelation, the meaning of revelation versus miracles, according to the Course in Miracles. And it says, revelation induces complete but temporary suspension of doubt and fear. I'm thinking of those moments where you get like goosebumps and you're like, wow, you just know something suddenly, or you've been thinking about a concept and you're driving down the road and all of a sudden you just go, oh wow, that's what that meant, or that's what the correlation is, or just that kind of clarity. It reflects the original form of communication between God and his creations, involving the extremely personal sense of creation sometimes sought in physical relationships. In other words, when that's, I guess, good for me, the personal, involving the extremely personal sense of creation sometimes sought in physical relationships. In other words, if we're going to create a human together, so there must be a personal sense of creation between God. When we are having those moments of revelation with God, I didn't think of them as creative, so I will add that element that I'm getting an insight that's creative, a personal sense of creation between myself and, we would say, source. In Abraham's language, that would be between my source or inner being. Physical closeness cannot achieve it. Miracles, however, are genuinely interpersonal and results in true closeness to others. Revelation unites you directly with God or your inner being. Miracles unite you directly with your brother. Neither emanates from consciousness, but both are experienced there. Consciousness is the state that induces action, though it does not inspire it. Consciousness is the state that induces action. Neither emanates from consciousness, but both are experienced there. Consciousness is the state that induces action, though it does not inspire it. Fascinating. You are free to believe what you choose, and what you do attests to what you believe. It's setting up a hierarchy that's fascinating there. So in other words, consciousness, once something has fallen into your conscious state, or where it's actually affecting our vibration, we can create action with it. But what sort of drops into your consciousness is not your consciousness. And I love that that's saying, so consciousness is the state that induces action, though it does not inspire it. In other words, what influence are you under? You're a satellite dish and you're picking it up. So something is inspiring your consciousness to what it is. And I think that's talking about what you're thinking about and what you're focusing on. That is going to impact your consciousness, or that's what's going to inspire the state of your consciousness that then is going to impact your action. And that's why it's so important to plug your vacuum in before you start vacuuming the carpet, as Abraham would say, because if you're not inspired by the right kind of energy, then the consciousness that's inducing your action is going to be in the wrong state of vibration to get you maximum results, if you want to talk about effectiveness and manifestation. Revelation, and I love that it says you can believe what you choose and what you do attests to what you believe. And that's why we all become so predictable, because people who are trained to know human behavior know based on what you do, most likely what you believe. And then if they talk to you for a little while and figure out your beliefs, then they're going to know very well what makes you operate. And then the question is, do you want to change it? Revelation is intensely personal and cannot be meaningfully translated. That is why any attempt to describe it in words is impossible. Revelation induces only experience. Words don't teach, only life experience teaches. Revelation is intensely personal and copy. I've experienced knowledge coming to me that I can't put into words. That's why any attempt to describe it in words is impossible. Revelation induces only experience. So maybe that's why when these big things have been happening, I've been gaining, like, feeling like there's so much more depth to the experience or wisdom gain because I'm having revelations, but there are no words to them. They're just sort of feelings and knowings. Miracles, on the other hand, especially around grief lately and processing of events, miracles, on the other hand, induce action. They are more useful now because of their interpersonal nature. In this phase of learning, working miracles is important because freedom from fear cannot be thrust upon you. Revelation is literally unspeakable because it is an experience of unspeakable love. In this phase of learning, working miracles is important because freedom from fear cannot be thrust upon you. You have to try it. Incremental growth, incremental freedom from fear. You have to incrementally realize that what you're being taught is true. And that's by trying it out. And then having those revelations through the trying. That's what's been happening the last year that I don't have words for. Growth is happening, but I don't have words for it. That's why I needed to read this. How funny. To let me know what was happening. I'm having revelations that are changing my experience and what's happening, but I can't really explain it. So the best thing I can do is try to capture it and exhibit it. Be an example. Be an example and just say, like, it's being open, exploring, asking, and just going through it, man. It's been tough. I mean, you've seen it. It's up and down. And right now we're on an upswing, but there's, again, a greater depth to it. So with that, I think that's a great place to stop. Get on with the day. I love you. Thanks for being here with me. What a blessing. Today, I think I'm in wonder. And I'm just gonna leave it there. Have a blessed day.